welcome to Ina Bergamot, where I like to talk about language learning, books, health, basically anything I feel that it's important to share. And yeah, so I have been out of the YouTube game for a very long time, and I feel like as I have made clear in the past few videos I've made, I'm very out of the habit of filming, editing, etc. I've never posted consistently, as I talked about in my feeling stuck video that I posted back in March. When you ask me now, oh Ina, how have the past few months been? It goes right over my head. Obviously there's been a lot going on in the world. I've not shared a ton recently about what's going on in my life or what's happening. I just want to say that I just hope that you are well, you're safe, you're keeping your mental health in check, because definitely in these kind of times where things are very uncertain, that's the most important thing you want to do. Do stuff that you enjoy, that you want to take the time to work on. Don't feel forced to need to be super productive or work super hard when you just feel like you can't, you know? I guess that's my message of sorts. So, as far as doing something you enjoy and taking part in it, in these difficult times, what do I want to do? I want to do a book tag, which I have never done before. You've posted one video about books and now you think you can do the mid-year freakout tag? Okay. This is just a nice little tag to do, and the more highly edited videos that I've had in the works for a while will be uploaded a little bit later. It's not gonna focus, June 30th. Obviously at the very end of June, this is now officially the end of the first half of the year, which is just crazy. To start off the tag, also of course the people who started the tag will be linked in the description. I've been enjoying watching the videos that people have made, doing this tag, hearing about their favorite books so far. I do have to say that my number of books I've read this year is definitely a lot lower than other people. If you don't know, I just graduated from university, my bachelor's in December, so this is officially my first year not studying. Therefore, I have more time on my hands finally, so it's kind of my time to relearn to love reading, kind of. And you will probably see this in what I've read so far this year. Currently, what I'm reading is Redeeming Love, a book that got recommended to me a really long time ago, and that I've had the Kindle version of forever, and I'm finally getting through it, and it's really enjoyable. Je suis une légende. I'm currently trying to learn French, so even though I don't understand all the words, I'm trying to read books in French, so that's the book in French I'm currently reading. And then I'm trying to get through War and Peace right now. It's right back here. It's a thick one, and at first I took it off my currently reading because I was like, oh, it's too much, I can't read it. But it's okay, it's okay. I'm getting there. So 2020 reading challenge. My goal is to read 52 books. Ooh, I should do the average word count, because I really think that makes the difference, because someone can read 150 books but they're all super short, even though they still count like books. But then I'm over here reading War and Peace and it takes forever, but it's a million more pages, right? It counts for more, right? Alright, I'm gonna do page count in a second, but let's just go through the books first. So I've read 28 books of 52. I'm 3 ahead of schedule, so that's pretty good. Just for reference, last year I read 22 books, and the year before that I read 12 books. To get to 52 books is crazy for me. I know it's not crazy for booktube, but you gotta have some, I don't want to say normal people, that sounds horrible. Your average person doesn't read that much, right? But in booktube it feels like everyone reads a ton. It just depends on the person. Alright, so what have I read so far this year? I read The Chronicles of Narnia for the first time ever. And then I read the Throne of Glass series. I read The Little Prince. I read a short book called Do the Work, like a motivation thing. You're a Badass at Making Money. Throne of Glass, Throne of Glass. Essentialism, another, productivity focused book. Self-help. Killing Commendatore by Murakami. What I talk about when I talk about running by Murakami. And then I had a long break where I wasn't reading that much. And then Digital Minimalism. And then the first book I read in French, Nos Étoiles Contraires, which is The Fault in Our Stars. And then The Polyglot Project, this thick book about language learning that took me forever to get through. Why We Sleep, also a book that took me forever to get through. I think I started it back in January. Very important book. Reinventing Yourself, a book about how to navigate life after trauma. This is a book by a friend of mine, a book by a friend of mine's mom, And it was really well done and I highly recommend it. White Fragility, and then Flowers for Algernon, the last book I read. Okay, that was a quick overview. Now I'm gonna get my average page count and I'll get back to you. Okay, so the average page count for the 28 books that I have read so far in 2020 is 358 pages, which is pretty good. There are a lot of shorter books that I read, so, you know, Chronicles of Narnia, The Little Prince is on the list, shorter books like that. But with the longer books I read, especially the Throne of Glass series, it brings the average word count up a lot. About half, a little under half the books, I had help of audiobooks. For some of them it was full audiobooks, for other ones it was just like partially. For example, to get through the book Why We Sleep, I was like, I need the audiobook, otherwise I'm never gonna get through this. So part of it was reading it and part of it was audiobook. So that was the overview of the books I've read so far. And so now I guess we can finally get to the questions. What are the questions? What are the questions? Alright, best book you've read so far in 2020. I'm just gonna be clapping the whole time. Did I even think about this yet? So I think I will go with, I would say the best book I've read so far in 2020 is probably going to be Killing Commendatore by Haruki Murakami. As I've already mentioned, 2020 is my get back into reading year. So for example, next year, I feel like what I'm reading is going to be a lot different than right now. When you're asking like the best book, Killing Commendatore doesn't scream at me like the best book. I definitely think while I was reading it, it was very nice and chill. There were definitely some very like intense moments where you're like, oh my gosh, what's happening? But the thing that I love so much about Killing Commendatore is the metaphors within the book, and it really gets you thinking, and it's definitely a book that I would like to reread one day. And out of all the books I've read so far in 2020, this is the only book I've said that I would like to reread. So there's something to that. But I would like to do a kind of half-half situation to say that the other best book would be Why We Sleep. And this is because even though it was difficult to get through, it's heavy on the research and the empirical studies that have been done. I would say this is one of the best books that I've read in 2020 simply because there's so much great information in that book, and it's about something so essential to life. And I feel like in general, people are not given enough information about sleep or just how important it is. Like you always hear like, oh, you should get 8 hours, and like, oh, don't look at electronics right before bed, you know, don't have too much light in your face before bed. But at the same time, I feel like there needs to be a lot more education on sleep just in general to realize like just how much the harmful effects can get by not getting that full 8 hours or even more. It was just very, very educational, and even though I don't know if I'd want to reread it completely, there's definitely a lot of information from that book that I would really want to go back to again someday. And so that, yeah, I would say Why We Sleep is my nonfiction pick for best book so far, and Killing Commendatore would be my best pick for fiction. Best sequel you've read so far in 2020. Well, the only series I've read is Throne of Glass and The Chronicles of Narnia. And as far as sequels, I think for me, you know, I don't want to just be hating on Throne of Glass. Like, I really enjoyed reading it, especially with such a long series of 8 books. You can really do a lot with character building and world building. If I had to pick my favorite book in the series, other than the last one, because the last one was just like the big ending, I would say that my favorite book in the series was definitely Heir of Fire. I listened to all of these on audiobook. Other than Empire of Storms, I had the physical book. I also have the physical book of the last book in the series, these two. But for the last one, I also had the audiobook. And I even have a whole video that I made about how that all went down. Have I edited it yet? No, but I'll get to it. Same with Murakami. Like, I'm so backed up with videos that I want to make. So this is why this tag is happening. Something nice and light to get back in front of the camera. Okay. Best sequel. Okay, so Heir of Fire is the third book in the Throne of Glass series, and why would this be my favorite sequel? It was kind of the turning point in the series where I feel like the focus was very much about like being true to yourself, and that sounds so cheesy. And anyone who's read the series kind of knows what I'm talking about, I think. But basically, I felt a lot for the main character, and just about how you can't run from yourself in a sense. Just the message from that book came across to me at least, was just about how much like you can't run away from your problems. Like you can run away from them for a while or even your whole life if you really want to, but at the end of the day it's way more worth it to be yourself and to fully accept yourself for who you are and take responsibility for yourself. And that's kind of like the nugget of value I got from that book that I really liked. And obviously like the story is a lot more extravagant and dramatic than just that simple phrase, but that's kind of like the vibe I got, and something I really liked, and it's something very important to keep in mind just in general in life. So I really enjoyed that part of Heir of Fire. Yeah, obviously there was no spoilers or anything, or I hope not. Next question. New releases you haven't read yet but want to. I think the one that everyone has been talking about that is also on my list is, what is it? Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That's the one release, like new release that I know of. Again, just getting back into reading and trying to knock down my TBR list. I'm not really keeping up with certain authors or new releases currently, but I'm sure I will more in the future. So yeah, that's the only book that's a new release that I want to read. Most anticipated release from the second half of the year. Like I said, I don't really follow authors or new releases. For now, I don't have any. 5, biggest disappointment. So I would have to say that it's a mix between two things. So I really had this love-hate relationship with the Throne of Glass series, because on one side of things, I think it was like a beautiful world, like the world building was really well done, and certain characters I really liked, but at the same time, like I should have known this going into it, but because it's YA, maybe there were some things about it that would annoy me more. And so there were certain parts of Throne of Glass that I was disappointed about, it could have been done a slightly different way. And basically it could have just been done adult maybe, and then I would have enjoyed it more. Overall, great series. I wouldn't say, overall, I think I was very satisfied with the story and, the plot twists and everything. I think it was really well done. But, yeah, at a certain level, I was also disappointed with it because of the juvenileness of it at times, not all the time. And just some things that could have been done better. But overall, I liked it. But the other disappointment I'm going to have to say was the Polyglot Project, which most of you probably don't know what the hell this is. But it's basically a compilation of people's stories of how they learned languages, and specifically people who have been part of the language learning community on YouTube. But back in 2010, this book was published in 2010, but self-published by someone who put all the entries together. So I believe there's a free PDF of this book online. If you try and find it, I'll try and put it in the description. And it's just a bunch of random entries from people who were part of the language learning community back in 2010. There's parts of it that I really enjoy. There was lots of little tidbits of good advice and all this kind of stuff. But definitely, the thing is, the subtext is how to learn many languages. What it should have been is stories from language learners or stories from polyglots. It was a bunch of mini autobiographies about people's language learning experiences, which was really interesting to hear about, but it was sometimes just the same story over and over. I learned it in school, I didn't like it, and then I joined the community and I loved it. And it was just the same thing over and over. There were certain stories that I really enjoyed. I plan on making a video talking about this book more in depth, but yeah, overall, I'm glad I read it. I bought this forever ago and it's been on my list. Finally glad to have it done. But there were parts of it that I felt could have been done better. And I know this was a community effort. Some of the stories I liked the most weren't even necessarily polyglots. There were people who would just share their story learning one language specifically, or anyway. So there were parts that I really enjoyed, but I think I was just disappointed by the lack of congruence. But then at the same time, it's not like a very organized official book. So part of my disappointment, I guess, doesn't have any merit because it's not supposed to be something super organized or not repetitive or anything like that. But anyway, there'll be another video for this. Next question. Biggest surprise. Biggest surprise? Do I have a biggest surprise? Biggest surprise? I guess. So for the next question, biggest surprise, I think I'm gonna have to say Kingdom of Ash, the last book in the Throne of Glass series, which might seem odd just because literally a second ago I was calling the series disappointing, but because of just the issues I had with some of the characters and stuff, I was thinking, oh, the ending, it'll be okay, right? Yeah, it's fine. This, 1,000-page book. Oh my gosh. And I do have to say that at the end of the day, when all is said and done, like, I really enjoyed the series, and this could not have been like a better ending, and I really enjoyed it. And so even though definitely through like the middle of the series, especially Shadow of Storms? No, Queen of Shadows, I was like slugging through it being like, oh gosh, when are we done with this? Not the whole time, but part of the time. Yeah, I was just really happy that there was like a nice ending to the whole series, and that even though there were parts of it I was definitely like about, overall I really enjoyed the ending. And yeah, and I would say, like, if you want a great adventure story and you don't mind YA, or you are young adult, then it's a fun ride and I would recommend it. So there you go. Favorite new author? I guess it's gonna have to be Killing Commendatore. Killing Commendatore is my favorite new author. No, Murakami. I've heard great things about Murakami and have known about his books for years, but just never got into them. And definitely want to be reading a lot more of his books in the next coming years and months, So yeah, definitely want to read more Murakami. Newest fictional crush, and then newest favorite character. Alright, I'm not gonna say I have a crush, as I think people have talked about in the videos I've seen so far of the mid-year freakout tag, that the fictional crush is kind of like an old question, like, okay, if you're only reading like romance and YA, then maybe you have a fictional crush, but I personally don't. But I haven't been reading a lot of YA other than Throne of Glass, so I need to expand my reading. New favorite character though, I do have to say that if anyone asks me, oh, who's your favorite character from Throne of Glass? Hands down, Manon Blackbeak. Manon Blackbeak. And if you haven't read it, Throne of Glass, and you don't know who that is, that's okay. But anyone who has read it, that's my girl. Her and Dorian, they were like the best at the end of the day, in my opinion. Everyone else could just freaking go away. Book that made you cry? Book that made me cry. Book that made me cry. Oh my gosh. Again, so bad. Like literally a few minutes ago I'm like, oh, Throne of Glass is so disappointing. And here I am saying like, oh, it was a surprise, it was so good, it made me cry. Okay, maybe it was just good in the end. Maybe I just have hate for no reason for Throne of Glass, but this was so... I don't think I'm like a super big crier, but I think this is the only book I've cried at during 2020 so far. But woo! I felt the feels. I felt the feels. Tears didn't drop until towards the very end. But anyway, yes, this made me cry. A book that made you happy. I would say that the book that made me happy is actually the first book I read this year, which is The Magician's Nephew. I don't know if you know the history of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the movies, and the books, and everything, but there's a lamp post in the movies. I remember being like, oh, there's just like a random lamp post in the middle of this forest, and you never know why. And in The Magician's Nephew, you find out why there's this lamp post in the middle of nowhere in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In the movies, if you've watched them, or if you've read the book The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and never read The Magician's Nephew, which is the book that comes before that, I just remember starting off the year being like, oh, that's what that was. So I remember like really liking that, and just the story was very cute and nice, and yeah, I just enjoyed it. It was a nice time. The Chronicles of Narnia in general were a nice time. I would have to say from the Chronicles of Narnia, I really liked the last battle, which most people don't like at all, but I think it just, I don't know, it brought the religion part to the story full circle for me a little bit more, and I think as an adult reading it, I enjoyed the last book more just because of the metaphors for religion it had in it. But yeah, but I would say something that made me happy was definitely like the first book and finding that reference to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah, but all the books were very nice. Most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received? It's definitely, oh, I can get it out. Oh no. Okay. I would have to say that the prettiest book I have bought is The Priory of the Orange Tree. It's still on my to be read list, but it's very pretty. I could just talk about books all day. I'm not gonna read them. I'm just gonna talk about them and plan to read them, but never actually read them. We don't need that. That's just too much. Also, I have a lot more books here, like physical in-person books, but these are all in French and for a different video. So, yeah. But yes, I'm currently reading War and Peace. I'm not very far at all. I'm like right at the beginning. This is a chunk. This is a brick. I could build a house out of like a ton of those. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I don't think there's any books I need to read or I'll die kind of thing. I'm definitely kind of struggling between wanting to read in English and wanting to focus on learning French, where I'm like, okay, the way to learn a language is to just focus on that language completely. So reading in English isn't going to help me, but I really want to read, you know, and not have to like use my brain so much by like having it in French the whole time. So I'm trying to find a balance between those two. But as far as this question of what books I want to read by the end of the year, I actually am planning on making a whole video about my TBR list for the next 6 months, and that's what that's gonna look like and everything. And I don't know if it's possible for me to get through all the books I want to get through, but we can try. But I guess the one book I'll talk about in this video that is not on my TBR list, but it should be, but it's definitely a lot different than the other ones that I would like to read, is An Introduction to the Languages of the World. Ooh. It's basically a textbook about the languages of the world. They have a list of, I think, at least over 1,000 languages, and I feel like I can't even talk about 100 languages. So I think it's really cool to just learn about way more languages than ever, because, you know, there's so much focus on the most spoken languages in the world, and for good reason, you know, because they're the ones that you can use with the most number of people. But at the same time, I think it's also cool to learn, you know, a little bit about a lot of languages. This is just the lists of all the languages they talk about or mention. But this is definitely a book I would like to get through by the end of the year, hopefully. I bought it for myself for my birthday. It wasn't cheap, it was 40 bucks. That's a lot. But I told myself, you know what? As much as you like learning individual languages, it's also good to just have a nice overview of all of them. I like a good dabble, but the hope is that this just gives me a nice overall knowledge of language families, how they're connected, and just having a little bit of knowledge of all languages rather than this focus on Germanic and Romance languages that I happen to have right now. The reason for my focus on Germanic and Romance languages right now is because that's what's involved in my life. I'm living in France. I lived in Germany before, and, you know, my native language is English, so that just happens to be my circumstances as well, even though I definitely have interest in other types of languages as well. And the last question, favorite book community member. I think on some people's lists they don't have this question anymore, but I guess I'll say mine anyway. I'm probably going to mention her in my TBR list because a lot of the books there were recommended by her that are on my list. From reading Killing Commendatore, I found a channel who I don't necessarily feel like I'm in the book community at all, and so maybe I don't have a right to even mention someone, but But just as far as someone's videos that I've been really enjoying recently, ever since I read Killing Commendatore in April, of course I was looking for videos about it afterwards, and I found this girl named Kate File, who, if you don't know, apparently is known as the Murakami girl because her videos concerning Haruki Murakami have gotten a lot of more views, I guess, or attention, and it's her favorite author. So yes, ever since April I've been following her content a little bit more, and I really like the types of books she reads and just the variety she has. And yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know how she reads as many books as she does, but yeah, that's my favorite book community member. Just like anybody else, I kind of just look at what comes up in my recommendations. I guess that's it. Well, thank you for being here for the tag, if you managed to get to this point. Literally behind me, this is like all the books I've ever owned. They're all right here. Or not that I've ever owned, but all the books and novels and stuff that I currently own and have in my possession. My Kindle's there as well. Anyway, this has been Ina Bergamot. Thanks for being here. Till the next time. No? I don't know what I'm saying. Also, the video I mentioned that I want to make with my TBR list, I will link that in the description once it is uploaded. Thanks for watching. Bye.